Hello everyone, how are you doing? How's your day going? Mine's quiet. Thought I might just take an opportunity to talk to you for around 20 minutes or so to answer a question I get asked a lot. How and why did I get started as a writer and a podcaster? Well, it's an interesting question and I'll give it a go to explain it. I'm not that big on talking about myself, and so I hope this won't sound too disjointed. So, how did I get to here? Well, I guess it's really just a culmination of everything that went before in my life. We're all a product of our history, aren't we? And mine has brought me to a place of wanting to continue being vocational as I've always been, but in a less hands-on or cold-face way, I suppose you'd say. I've done my time working face-to-face with difficult people, but I still want to reach out and offer hope and inspiration through writing novels, to give people who've suffered terrible trauma a really important message, that they can heal from it and go on to lead meaningful, rich lives, often in ways they didn't expect or foresee. And the thing is, I do this from a place of real knowledge because I've been that person. I've had the trauma, the terrible sadness, the absolute bewilderment, and the awful, awesome, terrifying task of rebuilding my life after it. I've had to do it more than once, and it's made me a survivor. But more importantly than that, it's made me into someone who gets other people's pain and wants to help them recover from it. These days, I do that with my pen, or computer if you want to be a purist about it. I write stories of hope and healing with a little bit of magic, and I offer them with love to whoever wants to read them. I'll be 65 this year, and there was a time when I couldn't imagine being this old. When I was younger, I had this intangible, not even articulated idea, I suppose, like we all did, that life was open-ended, and there would be time for everything. It once never occurred to me that I was part of a seriously screwed up family, or that I would run away screaming from one of my parents when I was 17 and from the other when I was 49, with my heart in 1,000 pieces both times. I never knew I would ever move countries in my early 20s and do it several times over throughout my life. I never imagined that I'd go backpacking, working and hitchhiking around Europe on my own. During my years of hating school and never fitting in there and being bullied, I never dreamed I'd end up going to university and getting a master's degree in forensic psychology and end up working with criminals and their horribly dysfunctional families. Burnout, that wasn't something I even knew about, let alone imagined for myself until I reached it. I had no idea what an empath was, let alone ever realize I was one and be driven to learn what it is and what it means. I once never imagined I'd run a business. I didn't know how many amazing, mind-blowing, wonderful adventures I was going to have. For instance, I didn't know I'd ride a motorcycle on my own across North America for 2 months, or that I'd pick up a 56-pound rucksack and hike the Grand Canyon from rim to rim. I didn't realise I would one day instigate a high-profile political protest that would effectively force the New Zealand government to do a U-turn on its refusal to fund a critical drug for Kiwi women with breast cancer. I didn't know how hurt I was going to be by the world, or how much trust I would lose in so many people, or how disillusioned I'd be about so much human behaviour. I didn't know how brave I'd have to be to get through life. I never knew how much I'd eventually learn about myself and other people. I didn't know how much some people's struggles would upset me or how much I would ever want to help. But I experienced all of that, and I learned from it all, and I've been shaped by it all, and I'm the person I am today because of all of it. Like most people, the path I've ended up taking in life is one I once never imagined. The truth is, though, I never really ever knew what I wanted. I never had a clear idea of where I wanted to go in life, probably because I never had much confidence to put myself out in the world. I always thought that I didn't have anything of interest to offer anyone. And I know where that comes from. Like many women of my generation, I suppose, I grew up in a house where I felt largely invisible and unheard. I felt irrelevant, and I carried that through to my adulthood. I spent a lot of years helping to heal other people's wounds without paying much attention to the fact that I had huge, deep wounds of my own that needed to be healed. And I know that many, many women will identify with that. But one thing was constant throughout all of my life. I've always been a voracious reader. One of the few supportive things my parents did was give me books. Our house was never short of them. I was always allowed to have as many books as I wanted. We had book month every month at school, and we were allowed to bring home a leaflet with the details of what was on offer, and I was always allowed to buy something. I've always had a book on the go for as long as I can remember. The smell and the feel of a new book to me is, it's one of life's great things. I feel about that the way some people feel about the smell of coffee. But yeah, the written word. I've always written poems and stories, and I used to write really long letters to friends before the advent of email. I once filled a whole school exercise book as a letter to a friend. I had wrote another really big book to my husband before we got married, when I was away for a few months and really missing him. I think I've been in love with the written word for my entire life, to be honest. I've also been told all my life that I write well. And I know that I do, so it seemed logical to me to do something with it. I just really never knew what. I was always a bit embarrassed, really, about my work and overly anxious about what people might think of it. And the weird thing is, I don't know why or how that changed. People say to me, what changed? Why did you decide to go forward with it and put it out there for public consumption? But I really can't pinpoint a point where that happened. It wasn't an evolution of any sort. I didn't do any big work on myself. I literally just woke up one morning and decided to take a punt on publishing my work. I went down the self-publishing route because I'd had a bad experience already with a book I'd tried to get published through traditional means back before I knew just how tough it is to meet the virtually impossible criteria traditional agents and publishing houses have. So very few authors ever get published that way, and the rejections are hard to take. I knew my work was worth something, so I decided to avoid the people who kept telling me that it wasn't. My hunch has paid off. I'm getting good reviews from readers, and my royalties are slowly but surely increasing, little bit by little bit, as the months go by. So it's heading in the right direction. But my first full novel, the one I'm still the most proud of ever having written, is called A Moral Swerve. It's the one that got rejected by a dozen different agents. It's the story of a woman who comes home from work one day unexpectedly early and finds 2 intruders in her home. It's everyone's worst nightmare, isn't it? Especially a woman's. But this woman, she finds these guys, she panics, she acts without thinking, and the consequences are devastating and far-reaching. And the outcome isn't what anyone predicts. The problem with that book was that one of the 2 main protagonists is a criminal. And in the interest of keeping him authentic, I wrote his character based on a collection of inmates I'd worked with as a prison psychologist. The result was that no publishing house would touch it. At the time, none had the courage to run with it. The language was too raw. The book was deemed unsuitable for mainstream. So with a lot of frustration and an almost broken heart, I shelved that book with no idea of what to do about it. It sat gathering dust for nearly a decade. But people say to me, why did you start writing the Teapot Cottage series? And the answer to that is a really simple question. I started writing the Teapot Cottage series because I was bored with the fiction on offer for women of my age at the time when I was going through the menopause. I wanted something light but inspiring, instead of the heavy text-type books on offer, all the self-help stuff, or the turgid bodice ripper fiction, or fiction aimed at much younger readers. I wanted something nice to escape into, but inspirational nonetheless, and there seemed to be very little for women of my age, so I thought, well, stuff it, I'll entertain myself by writing something instead. So I wrote a novel called No Small Change about a woman called A.D. Bostock, who was menopausal and reeling from a broken marriage and a major fallout with her kids. And as I started her story with no clue how it was going to end, ideas and plot lines just kept springing up in my head. And someone had once given me the best advice I've ever had as a writer. They said, even if it's fiction, write about what you know. So I did. I wrote about Adie's menopause and how unexpectedly awful it was. I wrote about an aging woman's fear about huge and sudden changes. And I wrote about things that had happened in the lives of some of my clients in my work. Deep trauma, loss of friendships, relationships, family dysfunction, and figuring out how to put a shattered life back together, how to find your courage again. I also wrote about vibrational energy and healing and the power of the universe as things I've been trained in and I have a deep personal belief in. And I managed to weave everything together into a novel that a lot of people like. A lot of people like No Small Change. It resonates particularly with women of my age. Adie Bostock ended up in a very different place from where she ever imagined she would be. And that too was true in reality. People who have to rebuild their lives often find themselves in a vastly different situation when their courage returns. When they're open to opportunities and possibilities, anything can happen. I have felt this for myself, and I've seen it in friends and clients, and I have seen the transformation and felt it that occurs when someone finds their strength again. I've been in places where I've been a smashed up wreck and I have found my strength again. And the direction I've gone in from that point has been extraordinary every time. And the funny thing was that as I was running after Adie and trying to keep up with where she wanted to go in this novel, another one popped up in my head, another idea to write about her very quirky and unusual stepdaughter, Fienne. So then I wrote The Power of Notes and Spells with Fienne as one of the main protagonists. Adie and her menopausal friends hovering around in the background, gnashing their teeth about the state of the nation and doing their thing. And I wrote about what I knew, again, that the world is full of people who feel like misfits, that nobody else understands, who despair of ever having the life they want or the joy of connecting with someone who gets them. Fienne, this young woman, she meets a man who's deeply estranged from his mother. They've got a lot of problems, and he happens to be a person she just bangs into. His mother is an enemy of her family, and there are a lot of wounds that need to heal, a lot of journey, again, that's so often like it is in life, rocky and anything but straightforward. And so the Teapot Cottage series began really with those two books. Book 3, When It's Meant to Happen, is about a couple at a crossroads in their marriage, traumatized and despairing after 7 failed rounds of IVF. The female lead has really big problems in her family, especially with her mother, and her husband is the same criminal character in the book I struggled to publish, A Moral Swerve. In the Teapot Cottage book, When It's Meant to Happen, he is completely reformed after taking the opportunity that becomes evident in that first different genre novel, and I managed to weave him and his story into the Teapot Cottage series. So I then went ahead and published A Moral Swerve. I toned the language down a bit, but I'm also mindful that the world is a changed place now, and moral sensibilities are not as easily offended as the publishing houses wanted me to think. So each book in the Teapot Cottage series is a standalone story, but the characters overlap and connect or link, and the rest is a community of the people with older matriarchs at the helm. They form the back blocks, the backdrop to all of the stories. These women, these older women who have taken the bull by the horn. Some of them are business women, some of them are farmers' wives. They're all kind of smashing it in their lives and doing pretty well, and they guide the stories to completion in lots of different ways. They're an absolute joy to write about, and I feel that they're friends I've had forever now. They're the kind of people I think we all want to have as friends. Solid, dependable, call a spade, you know where you are with them, there's no mind games, there's no bullshit. They are just ordinary, average people who have a decent handle on life. and a lot of wisdom and support to offer to their fellow women friends. And the traumatised and bewildered people who arrive at Teapot Cottage don't know they've been gently guided there by the universe, who understands their need to heal from various kinds of trauma and knows that they can do that thanks to the wonderful natural healing energy within the walls of the cottage. And that's the vibrational healing element. That's the magic in the stories, the help of a little bit of magic, which actually isn't magic at all. It's vibrational energy, which is a real thing in the world. And I have done a podcast about that too, which you can find if you hunt through the menu options on my YouTube channel. Vibrational energy, it is a thing. So yeah, now the creative tap is on and I have no idea how to turn it off. But I'm having so much fun with these characters and their stories. I don't actually want to turn the tap off. I feel like I've found my ecological niche, so to speak, and I'm amazed at what keeps coming. It's something else I never knew when I was younger. I had no clue that I'd become a published writer and that people would buy and enjoy my books and tell their friends about them. So what I'm doing now is several things at once. I write and I indulge my passion for that. I escape into this wonderful fictional world when reality just becomes a bit too annoying for me. We all want to do that from time to time, don't we? And that's what the books offer, a little escape into a gentler, nicer place just for a while. But I address real world issues that people might need to talk or think more about, things like the notion of being invisible in society, things like misogyny, stereotype, fear of the future, the inability to say no to people. We need to talk and think more about the impact of the messages we tell ourselves, what we accept from other people, all that kind of stuff. I provide what I hope is inspirational fiction for older women in a world where there isn't as much as there should be for them to escape into and read and enjoy. I answer to my vocation of wanting to be of service to people who are hurting in ways that feed my soul instead of stripping it like the work I used to do. And the podcasts, they're aimed at older women, many of whom I know are struggling to still feel relevant as they age in a society that stops noticing them, maybe writing them off as old frumps with nothing worthwhile to contribute. I know how that feels too, and in my own way, I want to empower women who feel that way to reclaim their true, valid, legitimate place in a world that needs their insight and their experience and their wisdom and their tenderness. I still remember the day around 8 years ago when the daughter of a friend of mine described us as old biddies. That really hurt. That felt outrageous to me because I didn't see myself as that. I didn't then, and I still don't now. Not at all. It was such an intolerant, disparaging, disrespectful comment from a young woman in her 20s. She had no clue that she had already succumbed to social stereotyping and written us off as irrelevant. It really stung, and I want to change perception. And if I can't change the perception of the ignorant, at least I can try and change the perception of the women those comments are aimed at. Women just like me who don't deserve them. But we're in very real danger of internalizing those negative stereotypes and ultimately seeing ourselves as irrelevant. It's a classic example of psychology's labeling theory, originally espoused by Howard Becker in explaining criminal behavior, and then it was extrapolated by another psychologist, George Herbert Mead, to encompass its impact on social constructs in general. The theory talks about the impact of giving someone, deviant or otherwise, a social label. And the overall crux of it is that if you tell someone often enough that they are something, they eventually come to believe it and act in the way they've been labelled. A form of behaviour modification, if you will. It's 10 times more powerful than it's subtle, and it's capable of affecting us before we know it. And the thing is, I can relate that to so much of my own experience, because although the rejection of my first book had nothing to do with my gender or my age, or at least I hope it didn't, I still believed that it wouldn't go anywhere. I really believed for quite a long time that my work, my voice, wasn't fit for the mainstream to hear. And I see so much of that around me, women who are accepting other people's judgment and decisions about the value of what we have to offer. And while a lot of the ignorance we face isn't really about our age or gender, we react to it in a certain way because being aging women, we are vulnerable to being silenced in all kinds of ways. What I want to do is remind women that none of us deserves to be silenced, and we don't have to be. We shouldn't allow anyone else to take our power by diminishing our worth. The pressure of the ignorant or intolerant or misogynistic against us is something we do have to fight because it's heavy. We can't allow ourselves to believe negative stereotyping to the point where we start being what everyone else expects. Don't accept a label handed down by someone who knows nothing about the true value of people. So really all of this, how I evolved, how I got to here, it's a culmination of everything that's happened in my life to date. Things I felt, seen, heard and dealt with and watched other people deal with. I've listened to a lot in my work over many years, and now I feel it's my time to speak. It's the time of all of us as aging women to speak and feel comfortable doing that. And if my work as podcasts and novels helps towards that sense of reclamation and empowerment for the self, even just a little bit, it's worthwhile. It's worth me doing it. I'm enjoying myself anyway for the first time in my whole life, and in some ways, I wish I'd had the courage 20 years ago to do what I'm doing now. But maybe, there again, maybe I needed to go through as many fires as I've been through and help as many others come out of them to have the wisdom and the skills and the heart to do this now. So I hope it helps. I hope I've explained well enough what I'm all about, where it comes from, and why I think it matters. Why should we go quietly into that good night when we can kick up our heels instead with plenty left to say, glittery heels and mad hats to wear, and all the wisdom in the world that the world really needs and doesn't even know it? Well, love to you, lovely listening lady. Look at what you've dealt with already in life. You have the beauty in your face of the wisdom in your soul, and you have heart and courage in absolute spades. Whatever has happened to you, get up, get going again, and find a way to live the life you want, live the life you deserve. Don't take no from anywhere. Tap into the courage that you have and shine as brightly as you can. That's my message, and I really hope it helps. Okay, I'll talk to you soon.